Far in the north, the country of Greenland is covered by a giant sheet of ice that is very thick and very old. Today, scientists from groups like NASA are using special technology called ice-penetrating radar to look deep down through all of that ice. This radar works by sending signals down into the white desert. Those signals bounce back to create a picture of whatever is hidden below, letting people see things that have been buried for a very long time. One of the places they are studying is the location of an old American base named Camp Century, which was built many years ago in the 1950s.
Camp Century is probably best known for being home of the first deep ice core to the bed of the Greenland ice sheet.
The story that was told to the world back then was that Camp Century was a peaceful place, created only to study science and learn how to build things in the cold.
Today, on the island of Greenland, the United States Army has established an unprecedented nuclear-powered Arctic Research Center.
But the pictures coming back from the new radar systems show something that does not fit that simple, peaceful story at all. The radar reveals not just a small camp, but a very large and complex city deep under the surface. It shows a whole network of long and wide tunnels that connect all of the buildings, like underground streets. Scientists immediately noticed that some of these main tunnels were much bigger than they needed to be for just moving supplies or small vehicles, raising serious questions about their real purpose. Even more confusing is how strong these tunnels were built. The radar shows that they were reinforced with huge steel arches, a design that is meant to handle enormous pressure and protect whatever is inside from extreme forces. A normal research station would never need this level of protection, because it is too expensive and not necessary for science work. The whole structure looks less like a laboratory and more like a secret military fortress built to survive something truly powerful and dangerous. The city was carved out of the ice starting in 1959. Engineers used giant machines to cut long trenches into the snow. They then placed steel arches over the trenches and covered them with more snow to hide them from the sky. At its peak, the base held over 200 soldiers. These men lived in pre-made wooden buildings that were tucked inside the tunnels. The radar shows that these tunnels stretched for thousands of feet. One of the most shocking things revealed is the sheer amount of equipment still down there. There are abandoned vehicles, heavy tools, and miles of copper wiring. It is clear that when the people left, they did so in a big hurry. They didn't just pack up and go home. They left an entire world behind. The radar pictures show that the tunnels are not straight anymore. The weight of the ice has started to twist them. This proves that the city is being crushed by the very thing that was supposed to protect it. Scientists are worried because the radar shows that the waste containers are starting to break. If these containers leak, the chemicals will enter the ice. The city is over 100 feet below the surface now, but the radar shows that the ice above is getting thinner every year. This means the city is slowly rising toward the sunlight. It is a slow-motion disaster that was hidden for 60 years. People are just now starting to understand how big the city actually was. It wasn't just a few rooms. It was a massive underground grid. The scale of the steel used is enough to build a skyscraper. This was the largest engineering project ever done in the Arctic at that time. It took thousands of flights to move all the gear to the ice. The cost was billions of dollars in today's money. All of that work was done in secret while the public was told it was just for weather balloons. Things go from strange to flat-out scary when the real purpose comes out. To understand the real reason why the United States military built that huge, strong city under the ice, we must first look very closely at the official story they told to the public. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, the American government created many films and news reports to show the world their amazing new project, Camp Century. These films were not meant to show a military base, but instead were designed to present a beautiful picture of scientific progress and human courage. The story they told was that Camp Century was a peaceful research station, a place where smart people could study the weather, the ice, and learn how to live and work in the most difficult and coldest environment on the planet. This was the story that was told to newspapers, to television stations, and even to the government of Denmark, the country that officially owns Greenland. According to these official films, life inside Camp Century was like living in a small, modern American town that was completely protected from the brutal Arctic storms outside. The films showed soldiers and scientists living in heated wooden buildings, all built inside the tunnels under the ice. These men had luxuries that were almost impossible to imagine in such a remote and frozen place. They had hot showers anytime they wanted, and they ate high-quality meals in a large dining hall with foods like steak and fresh vegetables that were flown in regularly. The city had its own library full of books, a movie theater to watch films for entertainment, a small hospital with a doctor, a church for religious services, and even a barber shop to get a haircut. This was all designed to show that American technology could create a comfortable and civilized society anywhere on Earth. No matter how hostile the natural world was, the heart of this amazing city was its source of power, a very special and advanced machine called the PM2A nuclear reactor. A nuclear reactor is a machine that uses the power from atoms to create a huge amount of energy. The PM2A was special because it was the first nuclear reactor in history that was portable, meaning it was built in sections that could be transported on a plane and put together in a very remote location. This small nuclear power plant provided all of the electricity for the city's lights and equipment. More importantly, it produced a huge amount of steam. This hot steam was sent through pipes to heat all of the buildings, keeping everyone warm and safe from the freezing temperatures outside. The presence of nuclear power was a powerful symbol meant to show the world that the United States was a leader in peaceful new technologies. This entire picture, the comfortable town, the happy scientists, and the clean nuclear energy was carefully put together to create a single powerful message. The message was that Camp Century was a project for all of humanity, a place of pure science and peaceful exploration. The United States military presented this story so well and with so much detail that the whole world believed it. It was a story that was exciting, inspiring, and completely convincing. And because this story was so perfect, it became the perfect alibi, a public explanation so strong and believable that it successfully hid a much larger and much more secret military plan for many years. Soldiers were even filmed playing baseball in the snow to make it look like a fun assignment. They showed off the laundry facilities and the modern kitchens. They wanted everyone to think that life in the Arctic was easy for Americans. They talked about how they were measuring the age of the ice to understand the history of the world. While they did do some real science, it was only a tiny part of the day. The rest of the time was spent building the city deeper. The barber shop and the library were real, but they were there to keep the soldiers from going crazy in the dark. Living under the ice for months is hard on the mind. The military knew they needed to keep the men happy so they wouldn't talk about the secret work. The movies they showed were carefully picked to be patriotic. Every part of the daily life was a stage. If a reporter came to visit, they would see a scientist looking at a thermometer. They wouldn't see the engineers measuring the tunnels for missile tracks. This was one of the most successful lies in history. It worked for over 50 years. Even today, some people still think it was just a science base. But the steel arches tell a different story. The beautiful story was just a mask for a plan that could have ended the world. The real reason for the city, the beautiful story of Camp Century as a peaceful science base, was not true, and it was created to hide a much bigger and more secret plan from the rest of the world. After many years, the United States government released secret military documents that finally told the real story. These documents revealed that Camp Century was only a small part, a test piece for a massive military project with a secret code name, Project Iceworm. The final goal of Project Iceworm was not to study the weather or learn about the Arctic. Its real purpose was to turn the huge Greenland ice sheet into a hidden and indestructible launch site for hundreds of nuclear missiles, creating a secret weapon that would give the United States a huge advantage in the Cold War. The Cold War was a long period of great tension and conflict between the United States and another powerful country called the Soviet Union. Both countries had thousands of nuclear missiles, and they both lived in constant fear that the other side would launch a surprise attack. At that time, most of America's nuclear missiles were kept in underground concrete structures called silos. The big problem with these silos was that they were in fixed locations, so the Soviet Union knew exactly where they were. In a war, the Soviet Union could destroy all of these missiles in the first few minutes of a surprise attack, leaving the United States with no way to fight back. Project Iceworm was created to solve this very serious problem by creating a missile base that was completely invisible and always moving. The secret plan for Project Iceworm was enormous in scale. The military wanted to use giant machines to dig a massive network of tunnels under the ice, stretching for about 2,500 miles, which is a distance longer than the entire width of the United States. Inside this hidden underground world, they planned to place 600 nuclear missiles. These missiles would not stay in one place. They would be mounted on special trains that would constantly move through the thousands of miles of tunnels, 24 hours a day. The key to this plan was complete secrecy and surprise. Because the missile trains were always moving, the Soviet Union would never know the exact location of the missiles at any given moment. The thick ice sheet above would act as a powerful shield, protecting the tunnels from a nuclear bomb attack on the surface. And more importantly, it would block any spy satellites or radar from seeing what was hidden deep below. Now, the true purpose of Camp Century becomes very clear. The large, oversized tunnels that scientists saw on the radar were not for normal trucks. They were practice tunnels built to test if the ice could support heavy trains carrying nuclear missiles. All of the scientific research that was shown to the public was just a cover story, a clever distraction to allow the military engineers to do their secret work without anyone asking difficult questions. The entire city with its nuclear reactor and comfortable living spaces was built to prove that a large number of soldiers could live and work under the ice for a very long time, which was necessary for the full Project Iceworm plan to succeed. The United States was willing to spend a huge amount of money and take enormous risks because they believed this secret missile base was the ultimate weapon. It was the one thing that could guarantee they would win the Cold War. The plan included building thousands of small rooms for soldiers and maintenance crews along the tracks. These men would live their whole lives in the dark, moving from one station to the next. The missiles themselves were a new type called the Iceman. They were smaller than traditional missiles, but just as deadly. The trains would be powered by electricity from many small nuclear reactors buried along the way. If one part of the tunnel was destroyed, the trains could just take a different path. It was like a giant game of hide and seek with the fate of the planet on the line. The sheer size of the tunnel network is hard to imagine. 2,500 miles of tunnels is enough to go from New York to Los Angeles. Digging that much ice would have taken decades, but the military was ready to do it. They had already started building the first few miles at Camp Century. They were testing the speed of the digging machines. They were testing how the trains handled the corners in the tunnels. They even tested how the missiles would be lifted to the surface to be launched. The soldiers at the base didn't even know the full plan. Only a few top leaders knew what was really happening. To everyone else, they were just building a big city in the snow. This level of secrecy is what made the project so dangerous. But even the best military plans can be crushed by the weight of nature. The American military engineers who designed Project Iceworm were some of the smartest in the world, and they were extremely confident in their plan. They believed that they had finally found a way to conquer the brutal Arctic environment and build a permanent hidden fortress for their missiles. Their entire plan, however, was built on top of one single, very important belief. They believed that the Greenland ice sheet was a solid, static, and unchanging mass of frozen water. In their calculations, the ice was like a type of rock or concrete, a permanent building material that once a tunnel was dug out of it, would stay in that shape forever, with very little effort. This basic belief was the foundation for the entire project. But it was completely and catastrophically wrong. What the engineers did not fully understand at the time was the true nature of a glacier. A glacier is not a static block of ice. It is, in reality, a very, very slow-moving river of solid ice. Over thousands of years, snow falls on top of the ice sheet, and the weight of all this new snow becomes incredibly heavy. This immense weight creates enormous pressure on the ice deep below. Under this constant pressure, the ice stops behaving like a solid and starts to act like an extremely thick and slow-moving liquid. Scientists call this glacial deformation. This means that the entire Greenland ice sheet is always moving, flowing slowly from the center of the island outward toward the ocean. The engineers had built their city inside a force of nature that never ever stood still. The consequences of this mistake for the people living in Camp Century were slow but relentless. The walls of the tunnels, which were supposed to be permanent, immediately began to move. Day by day, they bulged inward, slowly shrinking the living and working spaces. The strong steel arches that were supposed to hold the tunnels open were put under immense stress, bending and groaning under the weight of an entire continent of ice pushing down on them. The ice floor beneath the buildings was also unstable, twisting and warping in unpredictable ways. This constant movement made it a nightmare to maintain the base. Maintenance crews had to work around the clock using giant saws to shave away the encroaching ice from the walls. But it was a battle they could never win. They were trying to fight against the movement of the entire glacier. Even more serious than the shrinking tunnels was the danger this movement posed to the nuclear reactor. A nuclear power plant is a very sensitive machine that requires absolute stability to operate safely. Its many pipes for steam and cooling water must be perfectly aligned to prevent any leaks of dangerous material. As the ice floor twisted and warped, it put extreme stress on the metal joints and pipes of the reactor system. The engineers realized they were facing a growing risk of a terrible failure. A crack or a break in the system could cause a disaster. By 1966, the United States military was forced to accept a difficult truth. Nature was winning the war. The speed of the glacial movement was much faster than anyone had predicted, making Project Iceworm impossible and making Camp Century too dangerous for anyone to live in. They had to evacuate and abandon the base forever. The ice was moving at a rate of several feet per year. This doesn't sound like much, but for a building, it is a death sentence. The wooden structures were being twisted until the doors wouldn't open. The light fixtures were popping off the ceilings. The men could hear the ice groaning at night. It sounded like a giant animal was trying to swallow the city. One morning, the engineers found that the main tunnel had shrunk by 3 feet overnight. They realized that the ice was not just moving, it was accelerating. The heat from the nuclear reactor was actually melting the ice around it, making the movement even faster. They were literally melting their own foundation. The military tried to use more steel to stop the walls, but the ice just crushed the steel like it was paper. They finally realized that no human machine could stop the flow of a glacier. The dream of a permanent nuclear fortress was over. What they left behind was even worse than the failure of the project. When the United States military made the final decision to evacuate Camp Century, they were faced with a very serious choice. The normal and correct way to close a military base, especially one with a nuclear reactor, is to do a full cleanup. This means taking away all of the buildings, all of the equipment, and all of the waste materials to make the area safe again. But a full and proper cleanup would have been a very slow and very expensive process. It would have required thousands of workers and hundreds of supply planes. This huge amount of activity would have attracted a lot of attention from the world and from the government of Denmark. If people started asking questions about why they were removing so much evidence of a simple science station, the secret of Project Iceworm might be discovered. The military leaders decided that protecting their secret was more important than protecting the environment. They chose to abandon the city and everything in it, creating a huge and toxic mess that they would leave buried under the ice. The scale of what they left behind is truly shocking when we look at the official records. First, they left the entire physical city. This includes all the wooden buildings, the steel arches that supported the tunnels, miles of pipes and electrical wires, and all the heavy equipment they used for construction. But the buried buildings were not the most dangerous part. They also left behind an enormous amount of chemical and radioactive waste. The records show that there are approximately 50,000 gallons of diesel fuel still buried there. Diesel fuel is a toxic liquid that was used to power the vehicles and the backup generators for the city. They also left behind large quantities of a very dangerous group of chemicals called PCBs. These chemicals were used in paints, plastics, and electrical equipment to prevent them from breaking down. We know today that PCBs are extremely harmful to living things. They do not break down in nature and can cause cancer and other serious diseases. The most dangerous thing they left behind, however, was radioactive waste from the nuclear reactor. While the main solid fuel core of the reactor was removed and taken back to the United States, the reactor produced a very large amount of radioactive cooling water during its years of operation. Instead of collecting this dangerous water, packaging it safely, and removing it, the military used a much simpler and more dangerous method. They drilled a deep hole into the bottom of the ice sheet and simply pumped all of the radioactive liquid waste directly down into the glacier itself. This decision effectively mixed the radioactive poison with the ancient ice of Greenland. The military was able to walk away from this disaster because they had a single powerful belief. They believed that the Greenland ice sheet was the world's most perfect and permanent freezer. They calculated that the constant snowfall year after year would continue to bury the base deeper and deeper under the ice. They also believed that the extreme cold would keep everything frozen solid forever. They thought they had found the perfect way to make a problem disappear, but they were wrong. Global warming is now melting that ice at a record speed. The liquid melt water is reaching the waste for the first time. It is pulling the PCBs and the diesel fuel out of the ice and carrying them toward the coast. This toxic river will eventually reach the ocean where people hunt and fish. The three governments involved, the US, Denmark, and Greenland, are now fighting over who should pay for the cleanup. No one wants to take responsibility for a mess that was hidden for so long. The ice is melting faster than the politicians can talk. It is a race against time to stop the poison from reaching the sea. The secrets of the Cold War are finally coming out, but they are coming out as toxic waste. Would you live near a coast if you knew a nuclear city was melting into your water? This hidden base proves that secrets always come back to haunt us. If you want to see more stories about hidden history and secret military projects, make sure to like this video. Comment below what you think the military is still hiding under the ice today. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the world's greatest mysteries.